never thought my life could be reduced to the routine of borrowed teaspoons and a neighbor's late-night footsteps, but that's the thing about normal. It makes the abnormal easier to hide. My name is Alex, and I lived in a small duplex on the edge of a quiet Midwestern town. You know the kind. White picket fences with one slat always crooked, porches where people leave their shoes out overnight, and a mailbox that tilts slightly after every storm. It was the kind of place where you feel safe, because everyone looks like they belong, and that feeling is what people like to hide behind when they want to get away with small cruelties. It started with small things. The mail would be slightly moved, enough that I'd notice and shrug it off. My cat, Milo, who refused to be indoors most of the day, started scratching at the door at odd hours, insistently, like he wanted to go somewhere he couldn't explain. I told myself I was being paranoid. New bills, long work days, the kind of mental fatigue that rewires your alarm bells. But small things pile up, and before you know it, they form a staircase down to something you don't want to see. My neighbor, a woman named Denise, was the sort who smiled too much. She had a laugh that began high and ended in a concerned whisper. She baked bread for everyone on the block and left notes on our doors when she went on vacation. She was around 40, maybe early 40s, with hair that never seemed to stay in one style for long. On paper, she was the kind of neighbor you mention when people ask if you like the neighborhood. In practice, she was the kind who asked a little too many questions. One night, I came home around midnight from a late shift. The streetlights hummed in the fog like distant wasps. I fumbled with my keys and noticed Denise's porch light on. Not unusual. She left it on whenever she read, but she was standing in her doorway in her robe, holding a mug. Her face was turned toward my front yard, and she watched me with a kind of attention that made my skin crawl. She waved, and I waved back, faster than necessary, smiling like a person who'd rather be anywhere else. "Long night?" she called across the small yard. "You could say that," I replied. She stepped closer to the edge of her porch, the mug trembling in her hand. "Everything okay with Milo? He's been scratching at my window again," she said. Milo had never been inside her house. I told her that and laughed, but she didn't laugh back. She just nodded like she had expected as much, like she had been keeping a list of tiny infractions and was now checking them off. The first real warning came on a Tuesday. I woke to find the back door unlocked. I live alone, and I lock the back door every night without fail. The house was in the same quiet state it had been when I left. The lamp by the couch still warm, the TV off, the kettle cold. My heart thudded, a dull, animal thing. I walked through the rooms, calling Milo's name in a small voice until he answered from under the bed. He crawled out, rubbing his face against my shin like nothing had happened, and I told myself it was nothing but a dream. But there were footprints in the backyard. Not human shoe prints exactly, but a pattern in the wet earth like someone had walked the perimeter, carefully, avoiding the obvious paths. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the couch with Milo on my lap and watched the street through the blinds until dawn made the world too bright to pretend it wasn't happening. The next week, I found a note slid under my door that said, in careful, rounded handwriting, "Don't let him in." No signature, no explanation. I thought of Denise for the first time in a new way. The way you consider the people who know your routines, who might be watching your lights at odd hours. My first instinct was to call her, to confront the neighbor who watched my yard and baked bread for the block. But the thought of that smile and the way her eyes lingered at my window made me put the note in a drawer and sleep with all the lights on. For a few days, things calmed. Routine resumed like a bandage, and I wanted to believe that I had imagined the whole thing. Then a package arrived, addressed to Milo. It was a plain cardboard box, with the kind of tape you buy in bulk, and inside was a small knitted bed and a scribbled note. Thought he might like this. D. The box reeked of lavender and something else I couldn't place, like the antiseptic you smell in hospital corridors. I left the bed on the porch and didn't tell anyone. That night, my phone rang at 3 a.m. It was Denise. I answered, voice raw, and she spoke in that same bright whisper. Alex, I hear things. When I was getting the mail tonight, I heard scratching in your garage. Are you sure everything's okay? I'm sure, I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. I've told you, my cat. Just check the locks, she said, and hung up before I could finish. I started installing extra locks. I bought a motion sensor light that bathed the backyard in a pale, accusing glow. I considered getting a camera, but told myself that was dramatic, that cameras are for people who expect drama. A week later, the motion light had been smashed. Not an easy smash, the pole was bent as if someone had stood there and delivered a measured blow. The sensor hung from its wires, swinging like a stubbed finger. That same day, someone set Milo's food bowl on the porch in the early morning and placed a photograph next to it. It was a blurry Polaroid of my front door, taken from the angle of the street. The edges were worn, as if it had been handled a lot. On the back was scribbled, "He likes to sun himself on the sill. I watch him too." I stopped leaving the curtains open. I installed heavier curtains, the kind you pull like a curtain for a stage, so no one could see what was inside. Nights felt like a battery of small sieges. The timer on the lamp, the kettle on a loop, the blinds sealed. I tried to tell myself I was overreacting, that maybe someone was playing a prank, that the note and the picture and the broken light were coincidental. But pranks don't feel gentle like hands. Pranks are loud and messy. This was patient. This waited. I called the police after I found that Polaroid. They were polite and said they'd patrol a little more. They suggested I get a doorbell camera. I paid for the camera and had it installed the next day. I scrolled through the footage 2 nights later, heart tight in my throat. At 2:12 a.m., a figure moved across the edge of the frame. A woman in a robe, hair loose, stepping out from Denise's yard. She stood still for a long time, looking toward my house as if taking inventory. Then she turned and left, but the way she moved was deliberate, as though she had rehearsed stopping, looking, leaving. I took the footage to the police. They were more interested in the blurry outline than in Denise's familiar profile. "We can't do anything unless we catch them in the act," the officer told me. "Install more cameras. Get a restraining order, if necessary." It felt hollow, a legal talisman rather than protection. The next week, someone started leaving gifts every few days. A tiny ceramic bowl on the porch, a length of yarn, a child's shoe that couldn't possibly belong to anyone on our street. Each item was accompanied by a note. "For Milo, for when you're out. I like how you get up in the night." The handwriting stayed the same, neat, rounded, like someone who had practiced forming letters as a way to calm their hands. Once, on a rainy Thursday, I forgot my keys and stood on the porch, cursed when Denise's door swung open. She stood there, hair dripping, robe clinging, and for a moment I thought she would let me in. Instead, she smiled sadly and said, "I can't have you come in there anymore, Alex. It's better if you keep to yourself." "Why?" I asked. "Because I don't want you to be hurt." Her voice was soft, as if this were a confession. People who interfere end up hurting the ones they love. I stepped back. The threat was gentle and precise. It landed like a whisper inside my ribs. I started sleeping with a knife under the mattress, an old thing my grandfather kept in the drawer for hunting once, now cleaned and sheened. I told myself it was rational, defense. I stopped going jogging at dawn. I stopped leaving lights on in the kitchen. Life slowed into a thing measured in precautions. Then, one winter morning, I woke to find Milo missing. The cat bed on the porch was soaked. The yarn had been chewed and pulled into a neat ball. There was a smell in the air that I couldn't place. Lavender again, mixed with something sour. I screamed until my throat burned and ransacked the house, calling Milo's name until my voice was a broken record. He didn't answer. I went next door and pounded on Denise's door until she opened, hair wild, a towel wrapped around her shoulders. Her eyes had dark crescents under them like stamps. When she saw me, she feigned surprise and then concern that looked practiced. "Maybe he wandered off," she said. "Cats are curious." Please, I begged. He's never left before. He wouldn't. She opened her mouth as if to reply and then shut it, the way someone closes a book on a story they don't intend to finish. I'll help you look, she said, and pulled a flashlight from a drawer. She guided me down the alley where the streetlight flickered and stopped, down to the edge of the small cemetery behind our houses. We walked through the wet grass, and she handed me the flashlight with a tremor in her hand. He might be hiding under something, she suggested. We searched for hours. I used to think the scariest thing about my old apartment building was the elevator that groaned every time it passed the third floor. But that was before I met the guy who lived across from me. Before the knocks, the notes, and the nights I sat awake staring at my door because I knew, with a kind of instinct you feel in your teeth, that he was standing on the other side of it. My name's Evan, and this happened 3 years ago, when I lived in a small, older building on the outskirts of Denver. It was the cheapest place I could find after losing my job, a converted motel with narrow halls and carpets that smelled like old coffee. The upside was the location, close to the bus line, and the fact that most of the tenants kept to themselves, except one. His name was Marcus, though for a long time, I only knew him as the guy in 2C. I first noticed him on move-in day. I was carrying boxes up the stairs when he appeared at the landing, tall and thin, with a gray hoodie pulled tight around his face. He stood completely still, staring at me without blinking. Not curious, not friendly, just watching. When I said hello, he didn't answer. He just slowly stepped backwards into his apartment and closed the door, without taking his eyes off me. I laughed it off, chalking it up to social awkwardness, or maybe he just didn't like people. A lot of folks in cheap apartments are like that. But within the first week, little things started bothering me. Every time I left for work, I found my doormat slightly off-center, like someone had nudged it with their foot. Once, I came home to find the peephole in my door smeared with fingerprints. Another time, my lock felt warm, like someone had just touched it. I told myself I was imagining it. Stress, long hours, weird neighbors, normal stuff. Then one night around 1 a.m., I heard knocking. Not on my door, on the wall behind my bed. A slow, steady tapping, like someone using a single knuckle. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. Pause. I sat up, adrenaline snapping me awake. The apartment behind that wall was 2C. I pressed my ear to the wall, but the tapping stopped immediately. The next morning, I ran into Marcus in the hallway as I was leaving for work. He stood completely still in front of his open door, wearing the same gray hoodie even though it was almost 80 degrees outside. His head turned slowly toward me, his eyes red-rimmed like he hadn't slept. "Did you hear it?" he asked. His voice was low and hoarse, like he hadn't used it in days. "Hear what?" I asked, trying to keep my tone normal. "The tapping," he said. "They tap when they're awake." That was the first time I considered breaking my lease, but I brushed it off as a weird interaction and told myself he was probably dealing with mental health stuff. I wasn't going to judge. Strange as he was, he hadn't hurt anyone. Not yet. Things escalated in November. One night, I came home late after grabbing dinner with a friend, and as I turned the corner toward my door, I saw something sitting neatly on my doormat. It was a folded piece of paper. I picked it up, unfolded it, and felt my stomach drop. It was a drawing. A childlike drawing of my apartment door, my exact apartment door, with a stick figure standing outside it. The stick figure wasn't smiling. Its head was tilted at a sharp angle, almost broken looking, and above it, someone had written, "I watch you at night." I felt cold all over. I knocked on Marcus's door, ready to finally confront him, but he didn't answer. I heard movement inside, bare feet on tile, but he stayed silent. I slipped the drawing under his door, muttered, "Not funny," and retreated into my place, double locking everything. I didn't sleep well that night. The next morning, the paper was back on my doormat. Same drawing, same words, Same shaky handwriting, but now there was a second stick figure added. One inside the apartment. Inside my apartment. That day I bought a small camera and stuck it to the top of my door frame, angled at the hallway. I didn't want to get the police involved unless I had proof. I told myself I was overreacting. I told myself the camera was for reassurance. But the truth is, every night I found myself checking the peephole before going to bed, terrified I'd see him standing there, head tilted, staring. 2 nights after installing the camera, around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of footsteps, slow, dragging footsteps outside my door. They stopped directly in front of my apartment, then came the knocking. 3 soft knocks. Pause. 3 more. Pause. 3 more. My whole body went rigid. I didn't move, didn't breathe. I just stared at my door, waiting for the knob to turn. After a minute, the knock stopped, but I heard breathing. Someone was standing at my door, breathing slowly, deliberately. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and opened the camera app. The door camera was live. I should have waited until morning to watch the footage. Instead, I scrolled to the motion-activated clip and hit play. The footage showed Marcus standing just inches from my door, wearing that same hoodie. His shoulders were hunched, and his head was tilted so far to the side, it looked painful. His hands dangled at his sides, fingers twitching. The camera caught him leaning forward, slowly, almost curiously, until his ear pressed against my door. Then he lifted one hand and traced the outline of my lock with a single finger. After that, he knocked, steady and soft. When he finished, he didn't leave. He just stood there, breathing that slow, controlled breath like he was listening for me. When I stopped the video, my hands were trembling. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, I went straight to the building manager. His response was the usual. He'd keep an eye on things and talk to the tenant, but he didn't seem concerned at all. "Marcus has been here longer than you," he said. "He's had a rough time. Just try to be neighborly." That was the first moment I realized no one was going to help me. I decided to give the footage to the police, but before I had the chance, something happened that pushed everything over the edge. It was a Thursday. I got home from work, unlocked my door, stepped inside, and instantly felt something was wrong. The air felt different, colder. The apartment was dark, but not in the usual way. It felt disturbed, off. I turned on the light and froze. My couch cushions were rearranged. One kitchen drawer was open. My bathroom door was half closed when I always leave it fully open. Someone had been inside. I backed out of the apartment, heart pounding so loud it felt like it echoed in my ears. I checked my locks. They weren't broken. No signs of forced entry, which meant someone had used a key. Or they had picked it. I ran across the hall and pounded on Marcus's door. "Did you go into my place?" I yelled. No answer. I pounded again, harder. "I know it was you." Silence. I was about to turn away when I heard it. Scratching. Soft, rhythmic scratching from the other side of the door. I stepped back slowly. That night, I slept in my car. The next morning, I returned long enough to grab essentials and noticed something new. Another piece of paper on my doormat. But this one was different. It wasn't a drawing. It was a note. In small, neat handwriting, it said, "I need to come in. I saw you sleep." I felt sick. My phone buzzed in my hand, and when I looked, I saw a new notification from the door camera. Motion detected. 3:14 a.m. while I was asleep in my car. I opened the video. The hallway was empty at first, just dim, yellow light flickering. Then Marcus stepped into frame. He approached my door and crouched down until he was eye level with the lock. He pulled something from his sleeve. Thin metal tools. He tried the lock. Gently at first, then harder. After a minute, he stopped, straightened up, and leaned his forehead against my door, whispering something too quiet for the mic to capture. Then he began tapping. 3 taps. Pause. 3 taps. I backed away from my phone like it was on fire. I called the police immediately. This time, they took it seriously. They came to the building, talked to Marcus, and searched his place. I wasn't allowed to see inside, but afterward, the officer's expression said enough. They told me Marcus had been taken in for evaluation. They wouldn't tell me details, but one officer quietly advised me to move out as soon as possible. I did. Within a week, I was gone. New apartment, new neighborhood, new locks. For a while, I slept with the lights on. I still have the camera footage saved on my phone, even though I've tried deleting it a dozen times. Something always makes me keep it. Maybe proof, maybe a warning. But the worst part, the part I don't tell people, is what happened on my last day in the old building. I went back one final time to grab a box I forgot in the closet. As I walked down the hallway, I passed 2C. Marcus's door was sealed with bright yellow tape. But something else was there. A note, stuck inside the frame. In that same neat handwriting, it said, "You shouldn't have moved. I like watching you sleep." I didn't look back. I didn't breathe until I reached my car. And even now, in my new place, sometimes when I'm lying in bed, I swear I hear it again. 3 soft knocks on the wall behind my head. Pause. 3 more. Pause. 3 more. I've always believed the scariest people are the ones who seem totally harmless. The ones you wouldn't think twice about if you passed them in the hallway or saw them grabbing their mail. That's exactly why I didn't worry about the man who lived next door when I first moved into my apartment 6 months ago. His name was Harold. Mid-50s, quiet, balding, slight hunch in his shoulders. The kind of guy who wears those thick tan sweaters year-round and laughs too hard at his own jokes. If you'd asked me back then, I would have said he was lonely, maybe socially awkward. I never would have guessed what he was actually capable of. I moved into the building in early fall, when the air still had that mix of warm days and cold nights. I liked the place because it was cheap and close to work, and because the building manager promised it was quiet, mostly older folks, nothing dramatic. My unit was 4B. Harold lived in 4A, directly beside me, sharing a long wall with my bedroom. Our first interaction was harmless enough. I had just finished hauling boxes up the stairs when he stepped out of his apartment, carrying a plate of cookies like some kind of suburban mom. "Welcome to the floor," he said, smiling a little too wide. I thought I'd bring something over. I thanked him, though I never ate the cookies. They smelled faintly like cologne, which threw me off. Over the next couple weeks, he made small talk whenever he saw me, always at strange times. Midnight, 2 a.m., early mornings when I'd be locking my door. He always seemed to be there, stepping out into the hallway like he'd been listening for me. Still, I didn't think much of it at first. Some people are lonely. Some people hover. No big deal. The first weird thing happened about a month in. I woke up at around 3 a.m. to a faint sound coming from the wall behind my headboard. At first, I thought it was pipes. Then I heard it again, slow, gentle scraping, like fingernails dragging along drywall. I sat up, heart pounding. After a minute, it stopped. The next morning in the hallway, Harold smiled at me and asked, "Rough night?" I froze. I hadn't said anything to him. I hadn't even seen him leave his apartment. "What do you mean?" I asked. He shrugged. "Heard you up. Thought maybe you couldn't sleep." I lied and said I was fine. That night, the scraping returned. This time it was faster, more deliberate. A rhythmic scritch, scritch, scritch. I pressed my palm to the wall. It stopped immediately. A second later, 3 gentle taps hit the exact spot where my hand was. I jerked away from the wall and didn't sleep until morning. The next day, I confronted the building manager. He insisted the noises were settling walls and that Harold was harmless, bit off, but harmless. I tried to believe him. I really did. But things got worse. Slowly at first, then fast. I started noticing small objects going missing from my apartment. Nothing valuable. Hair ties, a lighter, a mug I always left in the sink. I figured I misplaced them until the night I came home. to find my bedroom window cracked open. I never opened that window. It stuck so badly you had to shove your shoulder into it just to budge the frame. And yet there it was, open an inch, just wide enough for someone to slip something through, or to listen. That same night, as I lay awake, I heard Harold humming through the wall. Slow, off-key, too close, like he was leaning his entire weight against the shared wall. I moved my bed away from it the next morning. The real turning point came late one night after work. I had just gotten home, kicked off my shoes, and was microwaving some leftovers when I realized something was off. My bedroom light was on. I never left it on. I crept to the doorway, heart banging in my ears. The room was empty, but the window, my stuck window, was open half a foot now. The curtains drifted inward with the cold air. On the windowsill sat a single object, one of Harold's cookies from months ago, perfectly centered. My mouth went dry. I didn't touch the cookie. I slammed the window shut and latched it. When I angrily confronted Harold the next day, he acted confused, tilted his head, smiled in that slow, deliberate way that didn't reach his eyes. "Why would I go in your place?" he asked. "I don't have a key." But something about the way he said it made my stomach knot. Like he was amused, like he knew something I didn't. That night I pushed my dresser against my bedroom door, a makeshift barricade. I don't know if that made me feel safer or more terrified. Around 2 a.m., I heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, soft, stopping right outside my door. The shadow beneath the door didn't move for almost a full minute, then came whispering, too faint to make out. Just breathy, broken syllables. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe. Eventually, the shadow disappeared. I called the police the next morning. They did a wellness check on Harold, but said they couldn't legally enter his unit without cause. "Just avoid him for now," one officer said. "If anything escalates, give us a call." I tried. I stayed late at work. I started sleeping on the couch, even though it didn't help much, because every night that week, the scraping returned, the tapping, the humming. Then one night, I woke up around 4 a.m. because I felt like I was being watched. Something primal inside me just knew. I looked toward the window and nearly screamed. A silhouette stood outside the glass, tall, shoulders hunched, face pressed near the corner of the pane. The streetlight behind him cast just enough glow to see the outline of his head turning slowly, tracking me as I sat up. I couldn't see facial features, just the shape of him. But I knew. I knew it was Harold. He was on the fire escape, right outside my window. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands, dialed 911, and backed into the hallway. While I waited for the cops, I watched the silhouette remain perfectly still. Not moving, not flinching, just watching. When the police arrived, Harold was gone. They searched the fire escape and the surrounding area. Nothing. No footprints. No sign he'd actually been there, except for the window, which the officer noted had fresh scratches along the frame, like someone had been prying it. That was enough for them to speak with Harold again. This time, something changed. I wasn't allowed to hear the conversation, but I watched from the hallway as they knocked on his door. Harold opened it only an inch. The cop spoke. Harold shook his head. They spoke again. Harold's expression shifted from confusion to irritation, then to something else. Something cold, almost gleeful. He closed the door quietly, not slammed, just gently shut it. After a few minutes, the officers left, telling me again to document everything. I decided that night I was done. I'd break my lease, lose the deposit, whatever it took. I wasn't staying another day. I packed fast, barely thinking, shoving clothes and toiletries into bags. I dragged everything to the front door, then froze. A piece of paper sat on my floor, just inside the threshold. It hadn't been there minutes earlier when I passed through. My hands shook as I picked it up. The note was written in small, careful handwriting. It said, "I know you moved your bed. I like the old spot better." My stomach dropped. My body went cold. The wall. He'd been listening through the wall. Or worse, he'd been inside. I didn't even grab the rest of my stuff. I left the apartment, locked the door, and drove to my sister's house 30 minutes away. I barely slept that night, waiting for some sign he had followed me. He didn't. The next morning, I called the building manager and demanded he check Harold's unit. I don't know exactly what they found. They won't tell me. But that afternoon, Harold was removed from the building by police and taken somewhere. Either a hospital or custody, I'm not sure. I returned once during the day to grab what remained of my belongings. My apartment felt hollow. Wrong. The window was closed, but the latch was bent. The cookie was gone. The only thing left was one final note, slid under my rug like a secret waiting to be found. This one had only 3 words, written in the same small, steady handwriting. You heard me. That's the part that still keeps me up sometimes, because the truth is, I did. And I'll never forget the sound of those taps on the wall. Slow, deliberate, patient. Like someone who wasn't in a hurry. Someone who knew exactly where you slept.